Charles.
Hey there, Jason. How are you?
Welcome to Sunday. We seem further apart than usual.
I know,
It's like a kind
growing
of a reach.
divide.
Yeah. Well, so Charles, Faulty Towers, a show I haven't seen too much, a little bit. I was a Monty Python fan as a kid, so saw that a little bit. I think this show vanished into some obscurity when cable TV came out. I used to see it on like Channel 9 or Channel 11 or something.
I think you would be surprised that the small number of episodes that Faulty Towers actually had. I believe it's either 12 or 16 episodes. That's it. And I've probably watched way too much Faulty Towers.
Was it before Monty Python, or?
I don't know about that. I started watching it in the early 80s. So I don't know when it was. I think it was filmed originally in the 70s, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And of course the plot is that John Cleese, who's a fantastic actor, plays the henpecked husband trying to run this hotel in Torquay, which is I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, which is a small town, seaside town in England. And his wife just gives him nonstop trouble, and he's got the hapless Spanish waiter. That would be, how did she get in there? And I think in real life it might have been that the chambermaid was Cleese's actual wife.
Oh, wow.
And it's just slapstick, hilarious comedy.
Yeah. Well, it's a good formula because, you know, you can have celebrity guests on the show be guests at the...
right.
And that's what they were doing, right?
They were doing a little bit of that, yeah.
Yeah.
But no, today we're talking about the tower, the mammoth number of skyscrapers of frauds that have been erected by this team, Bonnie and Clyde Clinton.
Yeah, we should have done, what's the O.J. Towering Inferno?
we got plenty of ideas to come.
Yeah.
But I sense, and again, the art department has outdone itself now with the music department, getting the theme song in there somehow, of Faulty Towers. So thank you for that.
I gotta put a little credit to it's like some school band that was playing that.
I thought you did that.
No, I can't play a single musical instrument at all.
Yeah. So how did Monica Lewinsky end up in here?
I thought you wanted her.
Oh, did I?
There she is.
It's one big happy family,
Yeah.
the Clintons. But
well, Charles, you've got, as usual, quite a lot prepared for us today, and I don't have anything witty to say, so perhaps we should just go right into the...
So what we're going to do today is a few things. I actually need to carve about 20 minutes out of the typical presentation and go over some fundamentals on the size of the market for Main Street investing globally. We have that information. So when somebody says to you they've got $1 trillion plan, you ought to have a sense of how much money is spent in total in your country and in various countries before you start saying, yeah, I think we'll spend $1 trillion on that and $5 trillion on this and $10 trillion on that. So we're going to do some of that, and it's all actually quite relevant to the Clinton Foundation. But I beg your indulgence as I take you through that.
Wasn't it a $93 trillion plan?
Right, exactly.
How'd they arrive at that number? 33 trillion was already taken.
But the bulk of the presentation, we're going to be talking really about just how badly Bill Clinton and the people around him destroyed the Clinton Foundation in the first weeks and months after he left the White House in 2001, likely without even knowing what an awful job he'd done and how impossible it would be to put this thing back together. So rather than, my working theory is that rather than trying to play by the rules, he just installed people in the IRS, installed them in Justice, installed them in Treasury, got friends around the world, and said, look, you can write whatever rules you want. They just don't apply to me.
Right.
And they just went sailing down or motoring down that highway thinking they'd never get caught.
We've got specific requests for less bass.
For what?
The sound. We've got a very particular audience.
Right. So if this happened in 2001, and remember, we've been talking about this for a while now, we have George W. Bush, he's as Hillary liked to say, selected to be president and then reelected in 2004. So he had a lot of time, W did, to look at this mess and see, as people had a lot of opportunity to see this expanding fraud. Why didn't they see it? What hold did the Clinton family have over the Bush family? And who are the people, who were in theory ostensibly looking at all this? Well, they were none other than Mueller, Comey, and Rosenstein. So, when you start thinking about conflicts of interest and this email scandal and the Russia hoax probe, the very people who were probing Trump and who this idiot Swalwell is, insisting, I heard him this morning, insisting that nobody actually knows what's in the report other than Mueller and Barr. And
what about all the people working for Mueller?
Of course, but as Swalwell says, and he's just convinced. He's on the House Lack of Intelligence Committee, and he's just convinced that he knows that Mueller found that Trump did engage in collusion with the Russians, and that he's a Russian agent.
Maybe he's got a special line into Imran Awan's shed, and he's able to get some information from that.
But so that's on the one hand. We're going to get into some particulars on new details that are actually even more stunning.
Even more stunning.
To me.
I'm stunned by that.
and just as we talk about this, remember that the business model for the Clintons, and now the Obamas are emulating the Clintons, is, and I think AOC has begun to emulate the Clintons and the Obamas. You assert that only you are aware of some gigantic problem that only you can solve if you just give me all your money. And enough people, it's almost as if there are a bunch of evil scientists on the outside, looking at the United States as an experiment and saying, okay, what frenzy can we whip up now, by coming up with some cockamamie tale, and let's see how quickly we can get the entire intelligentsia, in quotes, in the media to embrace this cockamamie tale. Let's regard it as a little lab experiment, And I think, honestly, that's what they've been successful in doing, and they're trying it yet again with AOC now. We'll get to her in a second. But the Clinton family, when we go back to the very beginning, these people, when they left the White House in January of 2001, they admit, both of them, they were dead broke. That's a stunning accomplishment. How do you get to be selected as President of the United States, reelected, and you're dead broke?
It seemed like a very awkward moment to me when there's some famous interview where Hillary says, well, as you know, we were broke when we left. Well, you wouldn't know. It just seems like a really staged, awkward lie.
They weren't broke. They had Williamson Connolly. We know from Taylor Branch's book about the tapes that in 1992, in the transition period, before Bill Clinton actually became president, they were already thinking about what to do with the presidential records, what to do with the library, how much of a book advance Bill and Hillary might ultimately collect. They knew they had that in the bag. And they actually also probably knew, once he bested conviction in the Senate after being impeached, they knew there was, at least the publishers knew, there would be a big audience for this book. Because until you paid your money, you wouldn't know what he might have revealed in this tome that is best used as a doorstopper. It's so dense and long. It's a 1,000-page book. Most people don't want to read a book much past 200 pages, let alone 300.
Most people aren't even reading a pamphlet.
Exactly. So really what we've been exposing all these many weeks and months and years is false philanthropy. People who would stand up and say, I'm a philanthropist. And indeed, one of the Faulty Towers episodes is about just that, it's called A Touch of Class. And it's about somebody who walks in and palms himself off as Lord Melbury. And it turns out...
Frottois Blamangrove.
Yes, exactly, Lord Melbury. And there's some other person who's, kind of scruffier looking, and Lord Melbury is they catch him just after Basil Fawlty has agreed to give his priceless, in his mind, coin collection to Lord Melbury so he can give him a valuation of it. Of course, the guy's just going to steal it.
Oh.
But that's in essence what the Clintons have been doing. They've been, anytime there's a disaster, whether it's a health crisis or a hurricane or earthquake, most recently they're trying to whip money up now again for Mozambique. There's been a cyclone across Mozambique. There's farmland underwater in the United States. Bill gets up there and Hillary gets up there and Chelsea gets up there and they say, we're just the team. If we can't do it, the Obamas will help you with it. If they won't help you, the Bushes will help you with it. And we should have particular focus for helping victims inside the 50 United States who are harmed by natural disasters and freak accidents and things like that. Obviously, we should do that, and we should be equipped as a country to do the same thing to help people outside our borders. But that should be a lower priority than helping first our own people who need help in many cases. And we shouldn't have this team of grifters that gets pulled out instantly after a hurricane, after a refugee resettlement problem or whatever, before there is actually a legal organization, and let a whole bunch of fundraising happen with a whole bunch of money come in the front door, and presidents and former presidents associated with it. So the IRS says to itself, well, we know there's a problem, but we can't indict all the sitting presidents involved, particularly now, as they're out there trying to raise money for Haiti or for this or for that. So they give it a pass. And then the grifters learn, when's the next natural disaster? Time to set up another fake foundation to raise money and steal from. So this is really, I would argue, it's far more urgent need than climate change. And this is something that is going on today, right now. We don't have to wait 12 years for the world to end. We can watch as the land of charities, good governance in charities, is destroyed by gullible donors, in quotes gullible donors. I mean, some of these people know exactly what they're doing. They're routing money to political families that that they see are operating a crooked charity in hopes of buying protection or gaining favors once Hillary Clinton, God forbid, reemerges as a presidential candidate.
Do you think that's going to happen in 2020?
It's very difficult to tell. I mean, I think to me, all this yapping about handicapping the Democrats, who's going to do all that yapping.
Joe Biden is going down in flames.
He's going to want to,
buy a shotgun.
Yeah, exactly. He should think about doing something else. But no, all that
yapping, yeah.
All that yapping doesn't really matter. What matters is, are the financial markets going to crash? Yes or no. If the financial markets are not going to crash, get used to Donald Trump, assuming he remains healthy. If the financial markets have setbacks that are prolonged and not a quick snapback, as happened in '87 and '89, if they're more like 2008 and 2009, then you could very well have a whole bunch of people return to this, real candidates. And I'm not a fan of Michelle Obama, but I think she is actually somebody who could win.
I agree.
And I think Hillary Clinton has about as much chance of winning for the third time as she does getting an Oscar.
If by winning you mean losing, I think she's got a great chance of that. I certainly wouldn't vote for Michelle Obama, but I do think she's the only sensible candidate for the Democrats right now. She's absolutely the counter Trump, the opposite of Donald Trump in every way, and I think a lot of people would vote for her.
But not if the markets are doing well. So if jobs are humming, the economy's humming.
But irrespective of that, she's the only strong candidate the Democrats.
Well, you've got Beto O'Rourke.
But I mean, people, it's like whether you're talking about a president or McDonald's or whatever, it's a brand name. People are like, oh, I know what that is. Let's get another Obama in there. And everybody who hates Trump loves Obama.
Yeah, and you would have the whole two for the price of one argument. You'd have
two grifters for the price of one.
Exactly. Maybe four grifters or five, counting the mother-in-law.
Two communist criminals for the price of one.
Counting the mother-in-law, you'd have five. And the daughters.
Yeah, the mother. Oh, the daughters, right. They'll eventually. Well, what's her name is in college now, right? Or dating some British guy.
Some wealthy British guy.
Right. So they're getting ready for her to run in 2040 or whatever. Oh my God.
So maybe we should go to the next page quickly. I know you've got some new subscribers, and for them in particular, it's important that people understand we're trying to do this differently. I noticed actually Pete Hegseth at Fox has got a special on tonight on Fox Nation, and he was explaining what Fox Nation is all about. And apparently they've decided, obviously with considerably more financial resources, to take our approach on Fox Nation. What they're doing is they're going into topics that require more treatment with less commercial interruption at length in these podcasts on Fox Nation. Which
I didn't realize
that.
Yeah,
and that's interesting to me. But so we're trying. We began this before they did, and the idea here is to try to serve up to the remaining people around the world who are interested in fact-based analysis.
The remaining people who are interested is like 5. Well,
8 of us.
Actually, no.
It's 81,000 at least.
Right. I was going to say we've got 655 right now.
Yeah, but to serve up to those of us who are actually nourished by facts, to give you the facts that we think are worth considering, and then to also give you working theories and hypothesis and analysis we believe is grounded in those facts. And so these are our opinions. We have an absolute First Amendment right in the United States to express these grounded opinions. We appreciate corrections if we made a mistake, or suggestions, constructive suggestions, and you can reach me through my site, and either Jason or me through Twitter, which we would encourage you to follow. But this is meant actually to be an interactive exercise, and I can report, without giving specifics, that more and more governments inside and outside this country are taking a keen interest in all of this work and are finding that it has saved them a tremendous amount of time, which is the whole intent here. We're trying to pitch this to people who are comfortable with numbers, comfortable with the law, comfortable with trying to understand what is a charity fraud, how significant it is it, why should we care about it, and not just to dwell into this mess, but to actually instigate people who could exercise prosecutorial discretion to go and nail these people and get them prosecuted, get them convicted, get them incarcerated, and send a clear message. Now today is March 31st, 2019. We're about 2 weeks away from personal income tax filing deadline, and generally speaking in the United States and in other governments, near a deadline, governments like to make a statement. Now, what better statement to people who might be thinking about taking a fake deduction? Because if you claim a deduction to any one of these Clinton Foundation charities, you are committing fraud. You know, you're either
if you don't know it.
If you should know it. If you're a private foundation, you have a duty to know it. Okay, if you're an individual, you know, you can't say when you take your whatever you say you gave to the Clinton Foundation, it's not a defense to say, well, you know, how was I supposed to know it was a fraud? I mean, how many stories? We're not up to Russian hoax levels with 500,000 stories in the mainstream press about Trump's Russian collusion delusion, but there's a lot of information out there if you Google the Clinton Foundation, and it's been in the public eye that there are issues with this ever since 2015. So you're going to go ahead and in the next 2 weeks and tell your accountant you made a $100,000 personal contribution to this fraud and think you're going to get away with that? You know, that's a risky thing to do, and it would be a nice move, frankly, for our government to pick somebody to indict over this. I mean, I would start with Andrew Kessel.
Why him?
He's the chief financial officer. He's been the chief financial officer since April Fool's Day 2004, as far as I could tell from his LinkedIn and other bio. He's been there 15 years committing fraud as the guy responsible for all of the financial statements. He's the guy who persisted in hiring a ridiculous accounting firm, BKD, that is also, I think, a prime target. I mean, the government, I think, improperly made an example of Arthur Andersen over Enron. But in the case of BKD, where you have the chief operating officer of BKD is currently the chairman of the top regulatory body for accountants, AICPA. Nice message for our IRS under new leadership and the Justice Department to say, you know, look, charity fraud is something we do care about because charities are wonderful, many of them, most of them. But when a former president, an aspiring president, the world's expert on diarrhea, and many other people get together and run this thing as a personal ATM and political and other influence peddling operation, and when it's supposed to, in fact, house the presidential records, only those of the only, let's hope, Clinton presidential terms from 93 to 2001, January to January, when that's what you're supposed to do, and instead you're paying for private jets and fancy travel and too many aides who shouldn't be working this place anyway, working from expensive offices around the world on projects for which you're not authorized.
Swanning around in private jets.
Swanning around in those private jets, or whatever the right phrase.
I like that.
Pigeoning around. So with that, this is meant to get you engaged. There are ways. It's very helpful if you like what we're doing here and you think you know a representative, you know a senator, you know somebody in the IRS, the FBI, or a state attorney general, or a district attorney, or outside this country, if you know parliament leaders, foreign leaders, the equivalent of our attorney general, please get these materials to them. And we have here, Jason's put together this handy dandy playlist, which now has, I think we're like more than twice the number of viewing hours as the whole Seinfeld episode.
Where is it? Oh, well, yeah, the list itself has been viewed, that's a good number there, 18,181.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It is. That's just the number of people looking at the playlist itself out of the 81,720 subscribers. And of course, Charles, every single episode of Sunday with Charles, as well as Charles Ortel is closing in, is in this handy repository. So for our FBI friends and international investigators who are just joining us now, this is a good way to get all of the information in one solid 304-hour session. If you've got the time.
And what we do with most of them, with the overwhelming majority, there are companion slides that have links, and these are all available to you free of charge, and you just pull them down either electronically or print them out, and you can follow links to the source materials. There are literally, at this point, I don't know that there would be 1 million pages. There's probably 500,000 pages of, if you were to print out every link.
Oh, yeah.
Right, it is easily 500,000 pages of other documents. And what we're trying to do here, I realized when I got on this that this was the biggest mess I'd ever seen in my life financially, and I've seen some pretty serious messes, and that to clean it up would require the type of patience that has been exercised by you, the viewership, and by Jason and our friends, because you can't contemplate something like this, you can't fly far enough away from the surface of the earth to see this thing, in its entirety. You have to take piece by piece by piece by this angle and that. And that's in essence what we've done here, laying down the opportunity for me and others to write books about it, and case studies about it, and textbooks about it.
Coffee table books about it.
Coffee table books for sure. Stand-up comedy, Broadway, and key into, the timeline here, that we started on this this date, and on this date we didn't really know that much, but we go back over this ground, it's really going to be a lot of very fruitful information, with the real question being not, my goodness, how big is the fraud? The real question being, we spend in this country close to $7 trillion on government now. How come the many people in government let this fraud go on for so long? How come people around the world let this fraud go on for so long? And I think the sad answer is because too many government leaders, so we could do this. We like this, this working and, try to, give speeches. We don't want to do that,
You realize you've just come up with $1 million idea.
What's that?
Forget about Spider-Man and King Kong, Sunday with Charles, the Broadway musical.
No.
I'm telling you, Charles, that's a hit in the making. So with that, is it next slide?
Please.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So now we have, at first blush, I look at this story from our new friend Jim Hoft, and that Clapper is now claiming, if you hit the first link, that Obama, in fact, did order the spying on the Trump campaign. Now, this is a plus and a minus here, right? Because
I just don't think we can trust anything this right. Depends on the day.
Yeah, but it does stand to reason here. I mean, Barack Obama was very much a political animal, is very much a political animal. He's really interested he's a political junkie. And the notion that on a story, imagine if it were true, right, that one of the Republican candidate was a Russian spy, right? You're the President of the United States. You don't think you should tell the President of the United States that, the head of our intelligence services believes that one of the candidates is a Russian spy in an election case. Now, if that came to my attention as President of the United States, I would first take this Clapper guy and his 17 people into a room, and I'd say, gentlemen, you have to forget the weapons of mass destruction canard that you foisted on us back in whatever that time. This is very free. We're going to have a civil war here if you're wrong. So give me all the evidence, and the evidence comes back. It's, Steele and Orr and, when Page and Strzok are not doing whatever their monkey business they're doing behind the scenes. I mean, the evidence was obviously not there. It was a complete wind-up.
Monkey business.
Yeah, exactly.
Any business this guy's in.
Speaking of, and so if it come to me, and I can't imagine what the responsibilities of being president, but let's say I was president and somebody ultimately comes to me as the head of my intelligence operation and says, in the middle of a campaign, we have irrefutable proof that Donald Trump is a Russian spy. I would not let that progress very much farther than that. You have irrefutable proof, okay, you got to call him out.
Yeah.
You can't let this, let's just wait and see what happens after the election. I mean, you either had proof or you didn't. And I think it's very clear that they did not have the proof. And what they hoped was they'd never have to use this. They figured that they just rigged the election.
Right.
So this may be like they rigged 2012, which I have my views about that. But this is just rich as hell that Clapper is, coming out now. Supposedly, he said this in an interview with Anderson Cooper, another fact-free journalist.
I feel like I should have made an animation with Clapper having a bus on a treadmill and just one after the next throwing people under there. Get the bus treadmill. But that's crazy. I mean, I think Obama did order it, but it's. I mean, again, this guy can't seem to decide what he thinks is the truth from one day to the next.
Yeah. And then this is a very lengthy. These people, I don't know who this person is. If this is Sundance, Sundance at the Last Refuge, Conservative Treehouse. What they're trying, it's a long post. Trying to explain why it was that Susan Rice, who I think is just a stone cold liar, why she would have sent that email just as the baton was being passed from Obama to Trump. That so of course we did, as the president instructed, everything by the book. And what was the point of that email? And I think this whole period of the 9th of November, in particular, 2016, through the 20th of January, 2017, is a period that needs intense focus in the public eye. What were these people doing? How far had they gone? Why would they have gone this far? Could it have been, as the disgraced liar Clapper says, could it have been that I doubt it was President Obama himself. It was probably Jarrett, or the strings behind Jarrett and Obama. But at a high level, a lot of people knew about this.
I'm not sure there's another human who looks as much like a Muppet as James Clapper.
Not wittingly.
If there were a Muppet James Clapper, it might look just exactly like him.
Right. So then we have this. This is pretty interesting. There's the Trump campaign. I don't have this up yet, but the Trump campaign apparently is selling. They're selling Adam Schiff pencil neck T-shirts.
Does it have the image?
I don't know.
I saw it elsewhere.
Yeah.
It's it's rare that there's a meme that comes up that I'm jealous I didn't think of first.
But Gowdy, in essence, is saying here, and it's referred to in the story, that the Schiff has that Pelosi actually has a serious problem because, if the intelligence services believe that the chairman of the Intelligence Committee is a hack, and will not guard secrets. They're not going to share. They're not going to be candid. They're seldom candid to begin with, but they're going to be even less candid. There you go.
It's quite good.
There it is, the pencil, the clown nose.
He should call David Swigert and start a lawsuit over this.
It's pretty funny.
I don't think public figures can do that, but it's all right.
Yeah.
So the Pelosi problem is that the
intelligence agencies will just tell everybody to go pound sand. Right. So long as he's going to be chairman, we can't cooperate with this. We can't be candid. We can't be candid with you. Look what happens.
Yeah.
In classified setting, we say one thing and you claim we say another thing. That destroys our credibility. He's got a point.
Yeah.
So I have a hard time. How do you pronounce this South Bend, Indiana guy's mayor's name? Is it Buttigieg or Buttigieg?
Beetlejuice.
Butthead?
I don't know. I've never heard of that.
But actually, this is hysterical. This guy is. I don't know anything about him other than what he recently said. What he said that Hillary Clinton, of course, she had obvious problems because people knew by 2015 there were serious problems with the Clinton Foundation.
He's reading your article, Charles.
Well, maybe, but the point. So I'm all for that. But this is really interesting that he would say that. It's smart actually to say it. And then the furious response from this, ass clown Nick Merrill is, just trying to. They think they're back in 2007 or 93 to 2001 when the Clinton machine would just, land on you hard. She ran on a belief in this country in the most progressive platform in modern political history. How is operating a slush fund where you're going to enrich your husband and your daughter and your in-laws and your ne'er-do-well son-in-law who can't make a go of things with his hedge fund unless he has inside information coming out of the State Department, and even that didn't help him.
Wow.
How can you possibly argue, Nick Merrill, that Hillary Clinton is a progressive?
Who is that Nick Merrill?
He's a senior guy in the Clinton orbit. He was, I forget exactly what he was. And they just thinking that you can slap this candidate around. Hillary Clinton is irrelevant, and Nick even less relevant.
I wonder. Yeah, there's a whole trove of people on Twitter who've got a lot of dumb things to say.
Here's Peter Daou, whoever that is. HRC's team failed to see early on that the election was already half over by mid-test with the attacks on the Clinton Foundation. Okay, who is Peter Daou, by the way? Can you hit that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Just check it out. Oops. He's polite. It looks like he wrote this book, Digital Civil War.
War survivor, former Clinton and Kerry advisor.
Confronting the far-right menace. The Tao of Peter.
Daou.
I don't know. Oh, look, he's followed by this guy.
Really?
I don't know about this guy, Charles. We'll have to take a look at that, what he's really all about. But I've never heard of him before right now.
Now, we've been talking about this, we're jumping around a little bit here, this link here, and I don't particularly like Axios or Mike Allen, and I think that it's a little bit much to say that this new firm Axios, he's the most wired reporter in Washington, D.C. That could be a little bit of an overstatement. But this is an article talking about, and not really in the kind of granular detail I'd like to see, talking about the threats posed by concentration of power in either monopolies or near monopolies across a lot of different industries. And I, as a conservative economic type, I am very much against monopolies. I think that is not a good move. Monopolies, you end up with I was raised, before there were really cell phones were popular, and you had one choice of telephone, black. That was it.
Well, monopoly is literally like a cancer of capitalism, isn't it?
Yeah. And so this is actually, when we think of the themes that will bring right people, left people together, were Trump to embrace, which I think he should, a new and tough look at Google, at Amazon, at some of the software companies, some of the banks, and say, now wait a minute, competition is good. We're now in a place where some of these firms have structural monopolistic advantages, and they're beginning to really harm consumers. To take a look at the business model for Facebook and others that are, individuals provide lots of valuable information for free to the companies. The companies exploit, the Silicon Valley people behind those companies exploit the subscribers and users, and now are trying to stifle debate and drive the public conversation one way or another. I mean, it's getting to a very dangerous place.
Charles, it's very rare that you repeat yourself, but this is a theme you've repeated many times, and I'm glad you have, because I was watching back one of our previous shows yesterday and listening to you say that without concentrating on all this, and it hit me properly for the first time. People who are using these services aren't being told exactly what the deal is. And as a matter of fact, people who are advertising on the services aren't either. And it also struck me that it feeds into one of my major concerns. So people want anonymity online, but there needs to be some balance between being anonymous and being counted as one of the users. Like, in other words, if there's 80,000 fake users who have subscribed to Crowdsource the Truth, and I'm not able to, then only 1,000 that are real, and they're all on Patreon, I'm catering to a bunch of not real things. And furthermore, any advertisers that would put ads on videos that are being watched or trolled by these fake accounts, it's fraud, as you've said in the past. And we've seen a lot of lawsuits now that have attempted to take action against social media companies. There was a big conversation with Beck and Lee, who of course had the lawsuit against the DNC, and they ultimately determined that because of CDA 230 and the challenges in successfully bringing a lawsuit along the lines of what people wanted, it wasn't going to work. Now, I know I've probably said to you, Devin Nunes has, I think, been deceived into bringing a lawsuit against Twitter and users on Twitter for exactly the same things that they're protected by CDA 230 from. So what we really need from Devin Nunes and other people in Congress is a modernization of some of these laws that protect these social media companies that did not exist at the time that the Digital Millennium Copyright Act was written, and the degree to which computers in general and social media in particular has permeated life and has an impact on things like politics and elections that never existed before. And as you're pointing out right now, these companies have just got unprecedented control over these things and an ability to manipulate in the way that television couldn't.
Right. Right, and in general, I mean, the long arc, as Obama's fond of talking about, the arc of history, has been an arc where, particularly in the United States, and note to Eric Holder, you obviously know nothing about American history, one of the things that truly has in the past made America a great place is the degree to which we have encouraged debate, responsible debate, over contentious, vexatious issues. To try to solve problems. And as we're going to show in a second, the numbers speak for themselves. America is the most, even today with all our troubles, by far and away the most attractive place in the world to invest. By far and away.
I was going to say, go to Vegas and look around this.
No, to invest, which is money. Money talks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and something else walks.
Yeah, I thought this German, diplomat here. I mean, I actually like the way this guy speaks. Brexit is a big shit show. That's a senior German official.
Scheiße.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think he was probably thinking about the Mueller effort, but it's a question: which is the bigger shit show?
I think there's no doubt that Donald Trump has normalized foul language.
But the deputy foreman.
So this is a globalist guy who's anti-Brexit, right?
Well, Germany, as we'll show you, I mean, you're a German politician, you want to be relevant, you have to embrace the EU and the UN.
So in one sentence, the guy's quoting Shakespeare and saying...
well, he made it into zero hedge, which is probably unconscionable. Probably what he was trying to get done. But honestly, when you look at this Brexit thing, it's not like, you didn't know that you had a deadline coming here. And what are these idiots in Parliament doing? I mean, you had a referendum. You're supposed to leave.
They were busy ordering Adam Schiff T-shirts. They didn't get the memo.
Right. But there's going to be some big drama. Now, before we hit this link, there's been, I believe it was Roseanne Barr was kicked off everything. She's lost her job.
She's watching David Hawkins and tweeting about it.
That's good. But in Britain, apparently, they have a little bit more resiliency for caustic humor. And this just, Banksy, I don't even know who Banksy is.
I like Banksy. You got to see that movie, Exit Through the Gift Shop.
This is devolved parliament of chimps. These are the people he thinks are making the decisions, he or she, or whatever, I don't know.
I remember in high school they told me that if you had enough monkeys and enough typewriters, they would type out Hamlet, and I don't think that's true.
No, I don't either. Nor do I.
So Banksy is painting monkeys.
Well, you saw that.
Yeah, but what's the rest of this talking about?
It's just, he's just making, she is just making a point, the author, that this is back.
I think it's still unknown who Banksy is.
Probably Prince Charles.
No.
All right. Now this, I'm loving this, the meltdown, the next one down. Yeah, the meltdown at the Southern Poverty Law Center. I don't know, did you ever see one of their solicitations?
I've seen them get angry about like Laura or Larry or both of them.
But one of their fundraising appeals is just like, you would think that there are lynchings going on constantly, that there's people, or it describes a state of affairs that's so far away from being reality, and it's now completely melting down. I mean, I think there's a very good chance that this Southern Poverty Law Center could be forced to shut down, and then you go after the trustees and the donors, et cetera. This is a smaller fraud than the Clinton Foundation, but it's been going on for a long time, and there have been a lot of supposedly smart Democratic people supporting this. This is one of the many reasons why fundraising solicitations to charities need to, in fact, be regulated more closely. People are gullible. They hear something like the Southern Poverty Law Center, the appeal comes in, it's a mass appeal. Many people can't read the financial statements or don't understand their significance. But now, not only are they saying that it's a fraud, but they're saying that in addition, it was operated, the staff and the leader of it operated in a way that they're claiming is a huge problem. Sex discrimination, racism, sexual harassment, outrageous behavior. And this is something that was raking in hundreds of millions of dollars a year to fight that. Well,
that's the way it always goes, right? They're Alinsky-ites. They blame everybody for what they're doing.
Well, but it's bad.
Of course it is.
And again, this is tax time, a nice time to make an example of it. Then we have, this is interesting. We had some folks come in from California, talk to us about Scientology and other, quote, religions. I think in the modern day that we're in now, where, as we talked about, these technology tools are so powerful and people are so gullible, it's a fair question. What if I set up, the atomic gathering of Jason Goodman, and we decide that you're, the prophet, and I mean, I know you are, but you're the prophet, and
it would have to be the non-profit.
You're the non-profit, exactly. And we get somebody to write up a book of gibberish that you say you found in a field, and then we start asking everybody to give us 10% of their income. That is obviously not a religion, right? There has to be, we have to have a constructive debate about what is a religion and what isn't a religion. And you may not be able to come up with a complete, definitive guide, but you can come up with examples in the negative. In other words, you uncover something that purported to be a religion that turns out it's a sex trafficking operation, that should be shut down. And there should be serious consequences.
That's interesting that the Russian Scientology churches raided in fraud investigation.
Yeah.
Oh, they have video. Look at that.
Yeah.
They're maybe scarier looking than the guys that were busting into Roger Stone's house.
Exactly, yeah. I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that kind of a visit.
It's interesting, with communism falling in, the early 90s, I spoke with a theologian who spoke about how communism's anti-religious stance creates an entire generation with a spiritual vacuum. So something like this would be preying on a population that's difficult for people in America to understand from that standpoint.
But so that's food for thought, because we as we move and make progress with the Clinton Foundation, there are other sorts of charities. Then, this is an example of what comes out of our educational academic elite. This thing here. This is, I believe, a serious thing. I mean, can you imagine? This is whatever this is, phys.org. Researches doesn't even find poop throwing by chimps is a sign of intelligence. I mean,
but this is from 2011. How did this find its way into the news, Charles?
I'm just looking at this.
I think it would depend on who it's being thrown at.
But here we have Mr. Yurka, Bob Yurka of phys.org. I mean, come on. Why are you spending any time on this project?
Well, they're in Germany with the Leipzig Zoo.
Yeah, but I mean, to A, be thinking about it, and then B, coming to this conclusion, because you speak chimp, of course.
Well, he needs a grant. This goes back to the Adam Schiff issue.
I know. That's why
That's what he should be doing during his Senate Intelligence, or his House Intelligence Committee meetings. He should start throwing poop at people.
Yeah. That's in essence what he does do. So on a more serious note, I remember I posed the question of what dirt did the Clintons have on the Bushes? And here we have this book coming out Tuesday, this coming week, which I found rather shocking, that Barbara Bush, who had 5 living adult children at the time, would contemplate suicide, but that in this book, this isn't a book by Bush critics. I mean, this is Barbara Bush cooperated with this book, and Susan Page is a pretty famous person, the author. But this is just confirming that H.W. had a multi-year affair spanning the time when he was vice president and president. And this is something that I would guess, if you're somebody who's going to pull FBI files, which the Clintons did illegally on many, many people, I think you'd probably include H.W. Bush on the list, and you probably know about this affair. And when we think about what kind of leverage might have been exercised over the team that was in theory investigating the Clinton Foundation, might this have been one of the things?
Well, it's interesting that she's upset about the affair, but doesn't seem at all disturbed by the homosexual male prostitutes that were at the White House.
Yeah.
You remember that story, of course, from the Washington Times, right?
I do.
That was maybe more upsetting.
I don't know why. Yeah.
No comment on that, apparently, from Mrs. Bush. But okay.
All right, so we're going to spend a little bit of time here on a numbers project. And you've heard AOC bleat out that America needs to spend $93 trillion or more on her Green New Deal, whatever that may be. Now, these are numbers, sources at the bottom. The total amount of money spent in the world by everybody who is putting up plants and roads or whatever, in 2017 was $20 trillion. Okay? So she's proposing that we spend 5 times or 5 years worth of what everybody in the world spent on a project to affect climate change positively, whatever that means.
Well, to eliminate carbon dioxide, which it's not even clear if that is the key driver of climate change.
But we don't even know. I mean, it's like if you...
That's her area of specialty, don't even know.
Right, yeah, she don't... yeah, CRS. But then, let's just think about what this number, in a little bit more granular terms. I mean, we in America are not responsible for saving the planet. It's not like our taxpayers have to do that for everybody else in the world. So currently, the country that spends the most amount of money per year is China. on investments. Yeah, these are not speculation. This is like putting up houses and office buildings and industrial parks. Empty cities. Only $5 trillion. So in 2017, all they spent is $5 trillion. So she's saying 20 times what everybody in China spent last year on houses. That's what she wants Americans to spend on some vague project, which can't really be checked, right? Then, just looking at the U.S., we only spend $4 trillion, right? 25 times almost, right? You go down the list. Japan only spends $1.2 trillion. I'm looking at the 2017 column, and you go down the long list. We're spending $4 trillion in 2017. Mighty Russia is spending only $342 billion.
Very frugal.
Okay? And AOC wants us to spend $93 trillion on her vague green plan. You think about Saudi Arabia. That's a country that has they need to spend money on crap, right? And they're only spending, in 2017, $155 billion.
Half of that is gold Rolls Royces.
Right, exactly. And then, her socialist paradises, right? Venezuela. How much did Venezuela spend in 2017? Or people in Venezuela. How much was spent inside Venezuela? Only $20 billion. Okay? So this socialist paradise is so great that nobody wants to invest in it. They'll put $4 trillion in the US and only $20 billion in Venezuela. And Cuba, which touts their medical system. How could their medical system be worth anything? They spend in total in the whole country. And this is foreign investment included. This is all investment inside the borders of Cuba, only less than $10 billion, right? Venezuela and Cuba are not serious examples of economies. These are jokes from an economic standpoint, right? And the total amount, when we think about capital expenditures, right? Capital expenditures, people fight over those. Not fist fights, but you get reports and estimates, and people say, no, take that out, put this in, and you go back and forth. You agonize over spending this kind of money. And you typically have something that you could check. It's not like, we got to do this immediately, or we got to spend $93 trillion, or the world's going to end in 12 years. And as somebody was saying on television, I think it was Chris Matthews said, if the world's going to end in 12 years,
why bother?
Why even collect the garbage? I mean, just do what you want.
Go on vacation and call it a day.
So, this is clearly, on the face of it, it's a kind of project like, I remember when I bought my first weekend property with my now departed ex-wife. It was a 25-acre property, and it was basically a house on the top of a hill with a lot of trees. And being the city slicker that I am, I didn't know if the trees were valuable or not, and I knew I couldn't cut them all down because 25 acres is 25 football fields worth of trees. So I decided I'd hire a tree hugger, forestry expert, to come and give me an inventory. What do I own here? So the guy comes and he says, well, it's pretty wood, nice. There's birch trees, those are nice, but I've got a very radical solution for your property. I was even worse. It was worse. He was the Mengele of tree management. He said, what we need to do is kill all your trees.
Why?
He said, well, the trees are just not that valuable, but it's good land, and if we were to kill the trees now, then in 30 years you'd have a great forest. And so I egged him along, and I said,
I don't understand.
I know. So I egged him along. I said, so chopping down 25 acres worth of trees, no, we wouldn't chop them down. We'd inject them with, some kind of poison.
Wow.
And let them decompose.
Oh my God.
And I said, well, how do you think my neighbors would?
What's that going to smell like? You got 25 acres of rotting trees.
It's like the Caddyshack solution to getting rid of gophers.
Yeah, maybe you need a second opinion, right? Charles. I don't know if that guy knew what he was talking about.
Yeah. But his argument was that you kill all these things, they decompose, and then you plant new trees. And that's, in essence, that's a more sensible plan than the AOC plan, which is ridiculous.
Well, my concern about a plan like that is 25 years from now, if you're like, oh yeah, that didn't work.
Exactly.
What happens then? Yeah. This is a pretty stupid plan.
It was ridiculous. But anyway, this gives you one view of...
You left the trees, I guess.
Of how much people spend, but it's more complicated than that. If we go to the next slide, and then we'll be done with numbers. What I do here is I give you a sense of how much people spend, how much countries spend per capita, per person, on capital investments. And there's some big differences, right? In 2017, across the planet, we spent $2,600 across the planet, but there are big variations. China only spent $3,600 per capita. We spent $12,000 per capita, okay? The most of any country. Puny little Venezuela and Cuba, they spent $630 per person. 5%, in the case of Venezuela, of what we spend per person, and Cuba 7%, right?
Can I just look at the previous slide for a second?
Sure.
Because there was something here about, no, all right, no, I was thinking of something else. Interesting numbers on these countries.
But when you start talking, when people say $93 trillion, like the total amount of money, if we go to the right there, the 5-year total for the United States was $56,000 a person, okay? That's just the United States. And when we think about AOC's project, right, she made the laugh out loud, really foolish comment. We should go back to the gong, with a hook. You take the person off. Take the person off the stage. With a straight face, she said, when President Roosevelt needed to get the economy going, he came up with a New Deal. We have the same set of urgent problems, so that's why I have this Green New Deal. Gong. The difference is, back in 1933, when Roosevelt was sworn in, I believe March 4th, not January 20th, back then, his New Deal was a plan for the United States of America, a landmass that he was in charge of.
Building roads and stuff?
Yeah, but it was all dealt with territory that he could control, right? Her plan is a plan to deal with 70% of the Earth's surface, which is water, not controlled by anybody currently, and all of the land mass on Earth, of which we are just a small percentage. So even if her harebrained scheme, might work, even if we could somehow send Jeff Bezos up in a rocket to Mars and come back with $93 trillion worth of Martian gold somehow, that wouldn't affect the price of gold in the United States. Even if we could do all that, there's no assurance in this cockamamie scheme that the chief polluters in the world today, the Chinas, the Indias, and others, would cooperate in this scheme. Right? It's just it's a kind of thing where you want to say, we have a seniority system in Congress. Typically, before you decide that you can run the world, you might want to complete 90 full days on the job, which you had before asking for a raise. And yes, here's this bright, shiny object that's interesting and photogenic and all this kind of stuff, but you're talking horseshit. Makes no sense, and you're wasting valuable time. And this is just part and parcel.
She's creating carbon dioxide by talking.
Right. Well, it's the kind of thing. They needed another MH370 search, so they put AOC in Congress, and now they can occupy. They got the Russian hoax as something that's winding down, so now you can talk happy horseshit with AOC. But I mean, just the numbers are so crazy, and the idea is so stupid. It would never get off the ground. It's not like we don't want controversial ideas. Controversial ideas are great. But root them into some facts. What is a reasonable amount of money for society to spend? If this is truly an urgent challenge, we're 328 million people in the United States. The world has 7.6 billion people. Maybe there's some other people on Earth who would like to chip in and follow the Pied Piper of insanity, down the direction she wants us to go. But let's stress test this, the problem. Let's stress test the solution. And let's have a reasonable debate. Not, if you don't do this, you're a misogynist, racist,
you're anti-science.
Pig. Yeah, exactly.
Like, what does she know about science? There's no science involved in this at all.
No. So I did say I would take a few minutes on it, and now we'll go. Uh-oh.
Sorry. That shouldn't be making sounds there. Sorry, Charles.
That's all right. We could go to the, it's probably AOC saying, you can't talk to me like... All right. We have talked to you in the past about the American India Foundation fraud, and I have discovered some very interesting things about the American India Foundation since the last time we talked about it. The first is that the earthquake in Gujarat, which was the premise for setting up the American India Foundation, didn't occur until the 26th of January 2001. So please explain how the domain for the American India, the website for the American India Foundation, was created on the 9th of March 1996, almost 5 years before the earthquake. How did that happen? Now, it could be that somebody else did AIF.org and then American India Foundation just bought the domain. That's possible. But I think we need to understand the real history here, especially when my suspicion is that Rajat Gupta and the Indian government saw in the Clintons, they'd seen the sloppiness, they'd seen the fraudulent activity, and they saw a willing grifter, somebody who needed money, and they spotted this team early on, and that the history of corruption involving India and other countries, but India especially, and the Clintons and their backers, is probably a much larger canvas than has currently been painted. Remember, India in 1996 was just coming out, like months of coming out from embracing socialism. That was a disaster for the country of India. They had a very limited internal consumption market in '96, very limited investment activity, and grand plans were embraced and sold by this finance minister who became prime minister, Manmohan Singh. And at the same time, this coincided with Rajat Gupta, an Indian, an American, I think now of Indian extraction, Harvard Business School graduate, 5 years ahead of me, had surged into this role as managing partner for this gigantic consulting firm. So this project here needs to be studied going well back before 2001 to examine how the alliance between the Clintons and the Clinton administration and India happened. What are all the dimensions of that alliance? Who are all the Indian businessmen who were trying to get stuff out of America? What were the American donors to the Clinton Foundation and the Clintons trying to get in India? What kind of deals were concocted? And there's a lot of information on all that. So the earthquake happens on the 26th of January 2001. That's like the equivalent, this is a 7, I think, 0.9 on the Richter scale. This is a very, very rugged earthquake. And Gujarat's, I think, a very poor portion. I mean, India's got mostly poor portions, but this is an especially poor portion of this country of India. And this thing just slammed in to the country on the equivalent of our 4th of July holiday. So it was really just the opposite of what everyone was expecting. And because building codes are not so great in India, a lot of buildings and villages were destroyed, a lot of people were destroyed, and in consequence, there was a huge hue and cry and interest in trying to help the poor people of India. This also happened 6 days after Bill Clinton pardoned Mark Rich. Right?
Why is that significant?
Well, because Bill Clinton was getting hammered in the press by the New York Times and others for pardoning Mark Rich. It was a bad decision in the way in which he and the Clintons left the White House. So he needed a project to take him outside the United States, where he's always been a lot more popular outside the U.S. than inside the U.S. So when you go through the trail of figuring out how was the thing organized, they immediately started fundraising days after the 26th of January 2001. The public record shows that we've been through before. You can't do that. You've got to organize a legal entity in the U.S. You've got to operate it lawfully at all times. And they didn't do that. They didn't organize a legal entity called the American India Foundation until the 6th of March 2001 in Delaware. But they didn't do it properly. It's just only one person incorporated. There's no evidence that they came together in a physical location where they could operate and actually constituted themselves as a corporation with the required number of directors in the legal jurisdiction where they were, and creating the bylaws, etc. No evidence they did that. On the 27th of March 2001, however, they did claim in the filing to the IRS that they had come together in an organizational meeting. But we're going to show you in a second how that was impossible. Then on the 5th of April, Bill goes, and it's interesting to hit this link, Jason. Bill goes out to India to try to meet with people, to screen the groups, to try to figure out, which of the groups, and this I thought was a pretty funny.
It's a great picture of him.
Wears the new turban. And so this talks about how he was quite active leading a delegation. I think that there's Bill, but there were a lot of very famous people who got on a private jet and went over to India with Bill. And they went around India trying to figure out how to put this money that they were going to raise to use. So they were very clearly involved in fundraising and in activity. The question is, did they have a legal entity? Did they have a valid legal entity in the United States? I think we're going to show you in a second. No. Did they have one in India? They didn't have one in India there either, I suspect. But of course, in India,
probably loose with the regulations.
A little bit looser with the regulations, particularly when you're, working with a former leader of India.
Yeah.
It says here Rajat Gupta was on the trip.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go back into the...
was that before?
Wait. This says, New Clinton was the voice of influence within the American Indian Foundation, which has collected more than $5 million for earthquake relief. We're going to show you in a second that they may have collected that much money, but they certainly didn't spend it on earthquake relief. So here, they don't register in New York as required until the 17th of May, 2001, right? And if you hit that link, you can see for yourselves.
Too busy doing good.
Right. If you punch in the American India Foundation, there, yeah.
Is it?
India Foundation. And then you're going to have to put in 17795 in the CAPTCHA.
Wait, it seems to have not liked...
No, they're just going... It's just you'd have to punch 17795. And then
but this seems required, active only search.
Yeah, and then you hit search the database. And you hit that link. And it shows you May 17th, 2001 is the first date that they had registered. How did you have an organizational meeting in New York on March 27th if you didn't register as a foreign corporation in New York until May 17th? The answer is you didn't. Okay? So, and the people who are involved, we're going to show you some verbiage in a second from our friend, in quotes, Joe Conison's book. The actual organizational meeting, according to Conison, took place in New York on February 1st or 2nd, 2001, okay, before there was a legal entity in Delaware. So anyway, they then have this big fundraiser. They claim they raised $800,000 in New York. They file you don't need to hit the links, file an application for a federal tax exemption on the 20th of June. They get this conditional exemption on the 27th of July. And off they roll. Bill cancels a trip to India in February 2003. I put this up because this article here, if you hit that one, it goes on and on and on about how, this is in the Times of India, which is a serious newspaper, goes on and on and on about how Chelsea Clinton is tipped to win her first job at a firm with a strong India connection, Rajat Gupta's McKinsey.
Right.
So here, you can't look at this in isolation. You have to look at the Clinton Foundation. You have to look at what Rajat Gupta was trying to get for McKinsey, what favors he was trying to get in the U.S. and around the world through the Clintons and others, what the Clintons were trying to do, offload their daughter with a job at McKinsey. All this kind of stuff should have been disclosed in the Clinton Foundation filings, in the American India Foundation filings, if they bothered to take them seriously, but they didn't. So if we keep going to the slides, we don't need to pull up these articles, but I put these up here. Jerry Corsi did an article on this India fraud on the 28th of October in WorldNet Daily. Alana Goodman, we've had this article up before, did on the 16th of November 2015, and Richard Pollack had one up the 2nd of October 2016. The reason I mention that for the FBI's benefit is I've noticed looking through the FBI vault file on other projects, when you see a slew of journalists writing about things like fraud, it tends to excite the interest normally of the FBI into doing an investigation to see whether the fraud exists, and if it does, whether people can be brought to justice. And the amounts of money we're talking about here are many multiples of the amounts of money that Corinne Brown is in prison for fraud, only $1 million, and the other fellow Stockman.
Steve Stockman, yeah.
So this is something that really deserves the kind of attention that I know the blind people in the FBI can devote to this fraud. So if we go to the next page.
For a moment, I thought you said the blind people at the FBI.
Yeah,
this is a lot of those.
This is a real eye opener. So this, if we hit this link, okay, just to show you what I'm talking about, this is actually on the website of the American India Foundation, this PDF, which will come up down here. Yeah, there we go. All right. You notice they are clever. This idea of using slightly different names. The real name of this thing is the American India Foundation, but they call it American India Foundation. This just is a glossy thing that came out in 2007, right? Talking about, they began their work in April of 2001. So if you go back into the slide.
But I just wanted, it seems like Bill Clinton, he's getting laid everywhere he goes.
I took out the text that you might have begun to focus on there. It says, our work began in April 2001. That the group of trustees was led by Bill Clinton. He is honorary chair, but he's a real trustee. And that fact should have been disclosed in the Clinton Foundation website, the tax filings in federally, state, internationally. It's never been disclosed. And any gains that Clinton may have gotten by his connections to the American India Foundation or otherwise in India needed to be disclosed, and they weren't. So then we get to the question of, all right, this is from the Clinton, and it says they launched a series of events across the U.S., and by the end of 2001, AIF had raised $4.4 million, specifically for earthquake relief in Gujarat. Here is their, quote, audit, if you hit that link. All right, this is from the world-renowned accounting firm.
BKD.
Go to the next page. Next page. There it is. Wilkin and Gutton Plan.
They got a plan for Gutton.
East Brunswick, New Jersey. Now, I'm sure they're a fine firm, but I'm also sure they have no offices in India and would have no ability to check what was going on in India. But you see here, members of American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, Mr. Hansen. Okay? This is what happens when you let accounting firms, get hired. This must have been a high-profile assignment for Wilkin and Gutton Plan.
How can this be the signature? It's the name of a firm. It's two different people. What is that?
No, that's the way they do it.
Okay.
But they would go down the page a little bit. That's their balance sheet, nothing much. Look at this income statement. We'll stop here for a second. Contributions, they said they raised $4.4 million. How come this says they raised $3.7 million? It's a difference. Okay? Now look down here on program service expenses. How much did they spend on Gujarat earthquake relief?
Is it $67,000?
Out of $4.4 million they said they raised?
Wow. What's up with that? And then victims of September 11th?
Which has nothing to do with their mission.
And who got that, and why is it such a round number?
Exactly. You don't have to be a financial expert to look at this and say this is rubbish.
That's like giving, they're just coming up with whatever they want to give them money to.
Exactly. And this is as sloppy as hell. It's worse than BK.
Perhaps the other $4+ million went to monkeys throwing poop in Germany.
Well, again, this is the trick with this stuff. The real fraud in something like this is the difference between what was actually raised and what they said they raised. So they could have raised $50 million or $100 million, and they said, well, we only raised $4 million. And then we only spent $67,946. At this time, now in 2001, late 2001, early 2002, Rajat Gupta and many people had a lot of serious things to think about. We had 9/11, we had Enron. But now look at this. Earthquake relief grants were only $51,000.
What's the difference between a grant and whatever the other money was?
Well, overhead, administrative costs. So out of the four, they went around, this august group of people went around and said, we have these starving people in Gujarat, India, whose homes have been pulverized. Give us your money, They take in $4 million and they only grant $51,000 in Gujarat?
A lot of overhead, Charles.
No, it's outrageous. It's outrageous. It's the kind of stuff that, I mean, this, if you're not going to make it, and it's not like Rajat Gupta could say, well, and Citibank senior executive can say, well, we don't understand math. We don't understand what was going on in India. These guys are American Indians. I mean, Americans of Indian descent with deep ties in the Indian community. If they couldn't figure out how to make this work, what the hell were they doing fundraising with an entity that didn't exist?
Right.
And this is just focusing on New York. I mean, this is a tale that will be told by me, whether the FBI prosecutes it or not. In gory detail, we're going to go city by city, state by state, month by month, year by year. What were these people doing? To have a 14-page audit, on something like this is ridiculous.
Filled with nonsense.
Huh?
Filled with nonsense.
Filled with nonsense. Yeah, here, look, stop there. Prior to the legal formation, some money was raised. You can't do that. You can't raise money
and then form a thing.
Yeah, that's not the way it works.
It's just like, hey, why don't you give me 4.4 million?
Yeah. Well, some of the money will go here. It's just ridiculous.
So he just shows up, he makes a speech, there's been some horrible event, he's like, hey, won't you give us some money? And people are like, hell yeah, it's Bill Clinton, send the money. He's got this major, overriding foundation, and then they're like, what should we do with this money? Let's create a new fraud to funnel 60 grand and keep the rest of it.
Yeah. And, this it's interesting, they're claiming that they set up a donor-advised fund at the Community Foundation of Silicon Valley. That will be that's the largest community foundation in the world, because and what they do there is the billionaires and millionaires give appreciated securities to this foundation, and a lot of valuable companies' stock has been contributed, so it's worth, I want to say, more than $10 billion.
Wow.
But this is an area, this is so sloppy. And mind you, this was coming together right after September 11th in New York, and people were grieving and their issues and whatever. But you're not talking about my kids with limited resources trying to write something up here. You're talking about senior executives of big, gigantic firms, and supposedly super smart, visionary Rajat Gupta. And this is the best they can come up with. I shudder to think what a McKinsey report would look like if this is the best they can come up with.
So Charles, is the Clinton Foundation itself a money laundering operation, or is it stealing money that then needs to be laundered in other ways?
My own view is it is the way I like to think about things like this is you answer the question. To answer your question, you have to ask a question, and that is are the finances of the Clinton Foundation and the legal aspects of the Clinton Foundation loosely controlled or tightly controlled?
Loose.
Non-existent.
Yeah.
Right? So is it a domestic or an international operation? It's international.
Yeah.
Just right there, you'd say the chances are this is a massive fraud. And then we're going to get into a few more examples, as if we need more. If we go back to the slides, I think this is a fraud magnet. So we say only $67,000, including overhead, was spent directly by this entity in Gujarat. But look here, this is Joe Conason saying that in early February 2001, the former prime minister, or I guess the prime minister, arranged a phone call on the evening of the 1st of February 2001. We know that is before there was any legal entity. Entity was set up March 6, 2001. The prime minister asked Clinton's assistants, which appears to be his cover story, Prime Minister of St. Lucia, asked me to get involved with HIV/AIDS, so of course I couldn't say no. Everybody knows if the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, or however you pronounce it, asks you to jump off a cliff, you've got to do that. I mean, it's the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. Of course you've got your reputation doing that. So they set a short-term goal of $1 million. Clinton, supposedly, according to Conason, published in October 2016, Clinton knew that his American Indian team would raise a lot more than $1 million. So how come he only put $67,000 into earthquake relief in 2001? And then they hold, look at this, in New York, Citicorp Center is in Manhattan, where they had not registered, there was no legal entity. Clinton presided over the creation of the American India Foundation, chosen unanimously as the new group's honorary chairman. He would oversee a coast-to-coast fundraising sweep. Well, you can't fundraise coast-to-coast without having a legal entity, operating it lawfully, and registering in the key markets, New York, California, Illinois, places where he did hold fundraising events in his name. He did all this stuff in 2001.
Are people aware of the Citicorp Center, Charles? It's one of the more impressive, from an architectural standpoint, buildings in New York City.
Yeah.
So what would, I mean, it's like, again, these charities are having like the most expensive real estate you can get your hands on and stuff.
Well, Victor Menezes is a senior guy at Citicorp. So one of the other things they did is Citicorp was in deep trouble at this point. I mean, everyone was in deep trouble after 9/11. And they had spare office space, they had spare staff. So Citigroup, this guy Victor, arranged for the American India Foundation to be run in part out of Citicorp Center. If it wasn't being run out of McKinsey.
It's interesting. Next slide.
So if we, so then we turn our attention to the Bahamas. Now, remember I said earthquake happened on the 26th of January 2001. Let's go to this link right here, the first link. See what else happened on the same day as the earthquake. Now remember, the 26th of January 2001, India, depending on the time of year, is roughly 9 hours ahead, right? So on the same day that the earthquake hit, if we go down this page a little bit further, stop there, this entity was set up, MindSpirit LLC, in Nevada, by the wives of two people who would leave McKinsey in disgrace. This is Kumar, and this Kumar was the technology partner for McKinsey who got involved. He was never convicted, but he was fired from McKinsey, and Rajat Gupta left in disgrace and served time in prison for insider.
Isn't this thing that preyed on gullible people?
No. This is just a way to route money to the Clintons and others. Okay, but this on the same date as the earthquake, this happened. Was it an accident? Was it a coincidence? I don't think so. It wasn't an accident, and it still exists. This thing. So we go back into the link. We discover we talked about this before. This is an SEC settlement document, which people can read at their leisure. We've talked about it before, where Vinod Gupta, who was not related to Raj Gupta, and Raj Gupta, who was at McKinsey, with this guy Kumar, accepting a consulting assignment on the side. He was taking pay for being a managing partner at McKinsey, but on the side, via MindSpirit, this guy Raj Gupta was providing services to Vin Gupta at Info USA, a publicly traded company that Vin Gupta was looting and using. I mean, he had like umpty-ump country club memberships, millions and millions of dollars being stolen. It's all described in this document. But one of the things they did for years, for like 2002, right the way through, I want to say 6, 7, or 8, they routed millions of dollars to Bill Clinton, and they covered expenses for the Clinton family to travel and this and that out of this public company. They were looting a public company to route expenses to the sitting senator and somebody who wanted to be president of the United States and a former president. And of course, and Vin Gupta is a donor to the Clinton Foundation. Raj Gupta is a donor to the Clinton Foundation. All this stuff should be in the American India Foundation filings, every Clinton Foundation filing, federal and state. None of it's there, okay? Now, they say the effort to fight HIV/AIDS began in August 2002, right? This is August 2002. There was no change by August 2002 of the parent company, Clinton Foundation. The William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation did not change its articles of incorporation. to fight HIV/AIDS by this date. Yet, they entered into a memorandum of understanding with this, the Caribbean Community and Common Market, CARICOM. They signed this thing, the counterparty signed it on the 22nd of August 2002, and it's signed with the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. This is, I think, signed in Guyana. I may have that wrong, but I think it was in Guyana. They had been traveling, they had the Barcelona conference in July of 2002. We've talked about that. Magaziner has a follow-up meeting on the 20th of July 2002. And I love this quote from Bill Clinton. "The Caribbean has cut a deal. It has a plan, but insufficient resources. Let's find out what is the deficit and go and get the money." You just see him saying it, you know. At this moment in time, Mueller, I think, was briefed right around this time. But at this moment in time, just if we hit this one thing down here, the FBI had been investigating the Clinton Foundation starting February 2001.
But Mueller wouldn't have been the director in February, would he?
No, but there's a briefing memo, and one that we pointed out before, I think in 2002 or 3, where Mueller was personally briefed. He came in September 4th, 2001.
So this would have been Louis Freeh, I guess.
No, Freeh was, yeah, Freeh, I don't know if he'd gone, but yeah, it might have been just Louis Freeh. But the thing stayed open for 4 years.
Do you know what I recently found out? Louis Freeh, as a private attorney, somehow represented Bandar.
Really?
I believe that's correct. We should check that, but it's something between Louis Freeh and Bandar.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. He is close to Bandar. So that's the Bahamas in a nutshell. This Bahamas operation, we've mentioned in the past that I believe, I know from my work in the Bahamas, if we can go back to the slide maybe, that in the Bahamas, they have concerns about whether you're setting up a foundation that's meant to help people on the island of the Bahamas, or whether you're setting up a firm that's meant to use Bahamas as a base and operate internationally. There's two different types of foundations. And so there's no evidence yet. I think they're trying to hide it. But there is reference to a William J. Clinton Foundation that may have been established in the Bahamas. If so, it should have been established around this time. No filings, no records, no reference in the IRS tax forms concerning it. But when you have such an operation in the Bahamas, that then gives you the ability to use that Bahamas Foundation as a way to open up other mystery foundations around the world and direct money to those mystery foundations. So this, if you're the FBI and you've got a little extra time on your hands and you feel like going to the Bahamas, it's not yet summer there, so it's still very nice, I would be getting on a plane, and I think there are FBI agents already in the Bahamas full time, and I would get these corporate papers. I know there's a file. I was able to send somebody, a Bahamian person, into the friend of mine arranged for somebody to go to the right place, and was about to look through this gigantic file, but then the people realized, this was before the election, they realized, wait a minute, we can't let them do that, so they just cut it out and only let them see a bit of the file. But there was, in 2016, a very large file on this thing, so let's get that file.
Yeah, I mean, looking at a little bit of it, it's like, excuse me, where's the part you don't want me to see?
Right, it's like most of it.
Seems like that's where the information is.
So this is an interesting story, and we'll just spend a little bit of time on it. You remember in the election, as the election was happening in 2016, there was a story about Qatar, and Qatar had given between $10 and $25 million to the Clinton Foundation, but not disclosed it.
Is this the Stop Qatar Now thing?
No, well, I was involved with that, but no, this was in the Podesta WikiLeaks dump. There was a lot of chatter about Qatar.
Oh, and also Hillary says they're funding ISIS.
Hillary says they're funding ISIS and all this. But before that, this is an interesting story that came out on the 5th of June, 2015. We learn that the Podesta group, this is John and Tony Podesta, are hired by Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, to try to polish up their image. I mean, they had prior to this person who won the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize,
Who won the Nobel Peace Prize?
The current embattled leader of the country, she had been imprisoned. I can't pronounce her name, and the military had kept her in prison.
Perfect candidate.
Yeah, so she comes out, and she's installed, and then she decides, I'm going to start persecuting this minority, this Muslim minority in Myanmar, the Rohingya. And she would get validly, how could this person who'd been imprisoned herself and persecuted under house arrest for years, win the Nobel Peace Prize? And, now she's persecuting a large Muslim minority in 2015. And Hillary had been taking credit, she's looking for successes to brag about when she was Secretary of State. The Middle East was off the list. But Myanmar, Benghazi was kind of tough to brag about, with the slave market being open.
Libya,
yeah. So they're getting a lot of heat from the mainstream press. And what do they decide to do? Well, let's pay off John Podesta and Tony Podesta and sign up an $840,000 contract, which I don't know if it was fully disclosed or not. And this is all excerpts. These are quotes excerpted from the story in the Free Beacon by Lachlan Markey. Then, the standard practice, with the Clintons, foreign policy, you instigate a refugee resettlement problem. And that's what's happening. Surrounding countries are all upset about what's going on with this persecution.
I mean, isn't that what they're trying to do in the United States right now?
It's a business, the role model. So then we have the statement here, which is kind of interesting, that the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation had been very active in Myanmar. Now, Myanmar, the question is, when did they start becoming active in Myanmar? Because for a while, I believe they were on the OFAC list, the Office of Foreign Asset Control.
Isn't that the list you say you don't want to be
on? You
on?
don't want to be anywhere near that list. So the question is, was any work done in Myanmar while Hillary was Secretary of State? This is bragging about how the Clinton Foundation facilitated a project by Procter & Gamble to develop clean drinking water. Well, how much money did Procter & Gamble pay Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton or Chelsea Clinton maybe for speeches? How come that isn't disclosed? And what exactly was the nature of this charity work in Myanmar?
This might be off topic, Charles, but there are some weird things about the Procter & Gamble logo. Have you ever seen that before?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Anyway, thought you might be interested in that, but I was wrong.
Well, no, I got just a bit more to talk about. So in this article that appeared in June of 2015, remember, this is before Hillary, this is when Bernie still has a shot. The Obama administration, this guy Viter, whoever he is, was in the Obama administration, allows himself to be quoted in foreign policy. I do believe with 100% certainty that not a single voter will make their decision based on Hillary's policy towards Burma, Viter told Foreign Policy. You'd be lucky if they know where the fuck it is basically what this guy said. And that gives you a sense of the disdain in which the Clinton camp and frankly the Obama camp holds the average American voter, perhaps not simply the right wing, but all voters. Now let's just go back up to the top of a page here. We're not going to today tease this out, but one of the things, remember I mentioned it's Qatar gave 10 to 25 million and didn't disclose it properly, didn't get it cleared properly the way it was supposed to pursuant to the MOU. Well, Qatar had this entity called the Qatar Telecommunications Company. There was, I think, a provider of wireless telecom services starting in the small country of Qatar. That's a very uninteresting proposition for investing, to invest in some entity controlled in a country where there's no law protecting foreigners and where there's an aggressive royal family that's willing to support radical Islamic terrorism around the world. That doesn't seem to be a very sensible place for an American to invest. So they needed to expand the footprint of Qatar Telecommunications Company. And they needed to change its name to hide the fact that it was the Qatar Telecommunications Company, in my view. So they changed it to the ridiculous name of Urdu, O-O-R-E-D-O-O, thinking that if you change the name, no one's going to focus quite as much. Probably had a brand consultant figure that one out. And they needed to expand to new markets. One of the markets they expanded to was Myanmar. And suddenly you go from being, a crappy, small enterprise located in Qatar to something that may have the leg up to operate in this opening up market, Myanmar. This could be a way of playing the Myanmar bet. And I think they got other international opportunities in addition to Myanmar, working in league with the Clinton Foundation. So the Clinton Foundation was, and Chelsea Clinton brags about it, that one of the things that the Clinton Foundation did to help Urdu was they conducted a survey of rural women in Myanmar to ask them what sort of cell phone service, what features and benefits did they want in their cell phone packages. Now, how is that charitable? I mean, the Clinton Foundation is supposed to be operating a records repository research center in Little Rock, and they're off taking $10 to $25 million from the government of Qatar, which I believe is frankly hostile to the United States of America, and trying to make the owners of this Qatar telecommunications company even richer than they already are by using the influence of the State Department and the Clinton connections to push the Myanmar government to grant Urdu a concession to operate telecom in Myanmar. I mean, it seems to me it's just straight up corruption. And we're out there in the weeds with the holdovers, the people whose ancestors were probably descended from the Japanese soldiers who came out into the South Pacific in the 1960s. Those same people
on the island thinking the war was still happening.
Yeah, those people are still working for the Clintons, thinking that they've got a shot of resurrecting Hillary for 2020. I mean, you contrast the fine-tooth comb that Manafort has been through. Now his prison is looming, long prison terms for much. I mean, Manafort was not the Secretary of State of the United States. He was the chairman of a campaign for a short period of time, okay? And he's going to go away for the rest of his life in solitary confinement, aggressively prosecuted, home raided, and we're not going to study, yet another example of what seems to me obvious corruption. People who, there's a motive, a means, and an opportunity. The Qataris, they profited from this. They ultimately took Urdu public and took a lot of money off the table. People in Qatar made hundreds of millions of dollars off this, if not more. They stand to make even more than that. That seems to be a cheap price to pay, 10 to 25 million. If that's the way it worked, you route some money to the Clinton Foundation, then strings get pulled in Myanmar and elsewhere, and suddenly you've got a very viable telecom business. And I bring this up to say that the telecom industry, with Digicel as one prime example in the Caribbean and in the South Pacific, there are many other examples of people who come out of nowhere with no money, somehow manage to get these wireless territory licenses. Next thing you know, they're billionaires. And there's case study after case study. That's an area that somebody needs in the FBI to rigorously go through and say, all right, let's go through all of these transactions. Let's get a top, and I know some of the people who are expert in this area. Let's have a list together of all of the evolutions of startup into multi-billion-dollar wireless telecom company, and let's go back over this ground and see whether there weren't bribes paid to get these contracts, and if so, let's get these people brought to justice. Because you can't have, we can't have in the United States of America the idea that the most vibrant investment place in the world, which we are at the moment, is a place where if you want to get ahead, the one thing you should do is not play by the rules. You just find corruptible politicians, pay them off, and you're going to become a multi-billionaire, and nobody will prosecute you because you can pay off the prosecutors as well. That is not an example we can let stand here.
But that's the way it's been going. That seems to be about as American as apple pie at this moment.
Well, I think large swaths of, I would go so far as to say 90% of the people engaged in business are scrupulously honest. It's that 10% that can look at the past period from 2007 forward, or you want to go further back and say, there's been a lot of obvious trouble here. We nearly went off a cliff globally because of excesses in our banking and investment sector. in the 2007-8-9 period. How many of those people are in prison? You got Madoff, let's put him away. But I mean, most of the big banks were rescued, save for I think J.P. Morgan and a few others, but the whole system was rescued by the extraordinary moves the Fed took to depress interest rates, and then our governments did to run deficits. And you know, we cannot, I don't think it's in anyone's interest to leave behind a legacy that you get to do this and you escape unpunished if you're Hillary Clinton for some reason, or Bill Clinton or Chelsea Clinton. But poor little Corinne Brown spends 5 years in federal prison at age 71 because she may have been one of 3 people involved. I think the amount in question for her is $800,000. It's less than Podesta's 1 contract year. So, record time.
There we go, Charles. Record time for sure.
And another thing I just closed by saying, in this period when all these transactions were going on, Hillary Clinton, from the 2nd of November 2013 through the 10th of September 2015, was a Class A, super voting, super powered, one of 3 trustees, along with Bill and Chelsea, illegally controlling a public charity, the Bill, Hillary and Clinton Foundation, Bill, Hillary and Chelsea Clinton Foundation, on the basis of bylaws that on the face of them were laughable, but yet were outstanding and were circulated to some states and not other states, were not adequately described as they should have been described. And yet the IRS under Barack Obama said, you know what, this is not a problem. I mean, this isn't a problem. This is a roadmap. This is how we're going to operate the Obama Foundation. We're going to do everything the Clintons did. We'll take it a few steps further. I mean, that's what really needs to be gone over here. You know, why did the Clinton Foundation, why did James Comey and Bob Mueller and Rod Rosenstein fail to nail the Clintons when they could have for charity fraud, when it would have been a lot easier, to make amends here? Why did they let it mushroom? And why did so many people refuse to follow the obvious warning? Why did the team that was on this thing from the FBI beginning in January of 2016, what roadblocks were put in its way to investigate the Clinton Foundation? The American people deserve, a real report on that. Who instigated that FBI investigation? Why did it take so long to start after? I'm not saying they should jump immediately and do something just because I write an article, but Bill O'Reilly called on his show early May 2015 for an FBI investigation. Why did it only start January of 2016? What shackles were put on the FBI agents? What procedures were put in place at Justice? Did Justice take it seriously? Did they impanel a grand jury? Did they allow subpoenas to be forthcoming? What happened with the IRS investigation in July of 2016? Again, same questions. What impediments were put in place? And what happened after Trump won, but before he was inaugurated, to say those investigations? Were they cleared? Were they wound down? There are good records on the FBI fault for it would seem, most investigations that are potentially of interest to the public at large. There's information put out to the public domain about what happened via the vault. What happened?
Via the book.
Yeah, right. So, with that, my friend,
we didn't have any just-in stuff.
It was so busy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Charles, it's interesting because the weather has improved dramatically during the time that looked like it did. It was sunny out there for a minute, but
good.
It's kind of. So, well, thank you, Charles, for another. I mean, it's just staggering how much, no matter how many times we go back to the well, there's more new, stunning information there. I hope something will happen. I mean, a lot of people have said that the Trump presidency is entering a new era now that the Russian collusion delusion is over. I hope that these calls for Adam Schiff to resign will result in him doing that. It was pretty funny to watch that hearing where he was just, getting yelled at and yelling at them.
Right.
It's just unhinged. C-SPAN is like the best show on television all of a sudden. Well, Charles, people who enjoy watching us here on YouTube and elsewhere, I hope they'll keep in mind that Crowdsource the Truth is a community-sponsored resource, and without people sponsoring the show, it can't continue. So I hope our viewers will go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and sponsor the show. They're going to get access to lots of great exclusive subscriber-only content. We've been doing some unbelievable shows on Patreon and Subscribestar. And of course, people who become sponsors for $10 a month or more are going to get that wonderful Sunday with Charles screensaver, universally lauded as the best screensaver they've received for sponsoring a show on YouTube. I mean, on Patreon. And also, you know, tomorrow is April 1st, so it's the start of a new month. People can get on there and watch all the back shows and keep everything going here at Crowdsource the Truth. So maybe we'll go enjoy spring, and I'll see you on Wednesday for some closing in, Charles.
All right. Great, Jason. Thank you.
Thanks. And tomorrow, don't miss Light on Conspiracies with Ole Damagard. That's going to be only available to Subscribestar and Patreon sponsors. Thanks for watching, everybody.